Today's video, we're going to talk a little bit about how codependency and anxiety are actually sort of similar in terms of where they come from and in terms of how we want to treat them effectively. So in the last video on codependency, I talked a little bit about the idea that people who struggle with codependency generally fall into one or two categories, most of the time relating to some of the challenges they had growing up. People who grew up with a lot of neglect are going to come to a place of being very needy in their relationship at first and needing a relationship for sure. And then once they're in a relationship, they're going to be a little bit on the demanding side. They're going to notice that the relationship isn't meeting their needs, and they're going to tend to complain and just be kind of noisy and irritated a lot of the time. Then when the relationship gets threatened, they'll chase after that relationship really, really hard. They'll be really, really excited to get it back, until they get it back, at which point the cycle starts again. So that's what happens when people come out of a space of neglect. When people come from a space of enmeshment, which I defined at length in the last video, their tendency is going to be a little bit phobic of intimacy. So if people get too close, they're like, too much. And so they're going to push people away and keep them at arm's length, even if they don't really want to. And then there are a lot of folks who do both, and that happens in particularly if I come out of a household with violence. If there's violence, I'm almost guaranteed to do both. And that can be physical violence or emotional violence, or I can witness the violence as well. So those are the ways that people get set up for codependency. Now let's take a second and talk about what codependency is. Codependency is a word with a very broad meaning. There's a lot to it. Rita Butler hassled me last time for saying it doesn't really exist. That's not true. Thank you, Rita. It certainly exists. It certainly is a worthwhile concept. But man, it has a lot underneath it. So what I like to say is, for me, codependency is when someone is engaging in a relationship in a way that is lopsided and unhealthy, and a lot of times everybody can see it except them. That particular pattern gets treated in adulthood with adults in very similar ways to anxiety. How about that? So there's two pieces to treatment of anxiety. The first piece is about belief, and the second piece is about what's called the limbic system. And the first piece for codependency is the same way. Codependency has the same two issues. There's belief systems, and then there's the limbic system in the brain. So if we start with the belief systems, a lot of times a person who's really codependent has some real deep-seated belief systems that are not functional in their life. One of the biggest ones is, I can't be alone, or I can't tolerate loneliness. Those are some of the issues that come up. Or my value and worth comes from what other people, or particularly another person, think about me. So those are cognitive distortions. They happen up here in the cortex, and when I address those in a long-term setting, I can't just think it through. If the problem could be solved with my brain, I probably would have done it already. Most of the time, most of the people I work with are really pretty smart, particularly when it comes to issues in relationships. So I have to have an outside person or people who can help me stay accountable in order to address the cortex-based belief systems that lead me into codependency. These beliefs that I need to take care of people in order to be okay. I'm not enough unless I have someone in my life who I can heal or nurture. I need to have somebody I can take care of, because if I had somebody who was actually healthy and independent, they wouldn't like me. They would leave me. That's a really interesting thing you'll see when people are in a codependent relationship with somebody who has an addiction, and the person with the addiction starts to get better. The person who's codependent a lot of times is terrified. Oh my gosh, when you get better, are you going to leave me? And sometimes they're not even aware of that when they're active in their codependency. But it's a real concern. It's a real fear for them a lot of the time. And what that reveals is an underlying belief that someone who is healthy wouldn't be interested in me anyway. So I have to take somebody who is sick so that I can nurture them and take care of them in order to be okay. So those are some of the beliefs that happen right up here in the cortex. The next set of issues to be treated happen back here in the limbic system, particularly the amygdala. The amygdala loves to find what's familiar. It loves familiarity. So if you grow up in a family system with lots of chaos or lots of addiction or a lot of codependency, you're going to be really attracted to that later in your life. In order to address some of those issues, a lot of times we need some more psychotherapy or sort of body-focused type interventions. The other actual great way to address an amygdala-based belief system, or some of the amygdala stuff, is actually to get into a relationship, have it be codependent and kind of a mess, and have both people be committed to growth. If both people are committed to growth and they both take what's called an attachment-oriented direction in their relationship, a lot of times they can heal each other. Okay? And that's new material, but that's really probably only the last 10 years that has become a thing in couples counseling. It's not, if you go see a couples counselor, a lot of times they'll use tools for communication and stuff, but they won't do the amygdala-based stuff that some of the new folks, they use a thing called EFT. If you're looking for couples therapy, find a couples therapist who knows EFT. Or a much lesser known variety of it is called PACT. It's developed by a guy named Stan Tatkin. Stan Tatkin's book is my favorite on the subject, and I'll post a link to it in the comments. If I forget, somebody remind me, and then I will post a link to it. And it is fabulous at explaining how to reprogram your amygdala in the context of a relationship where both people are more or less invested in the relationship moving forward, and maybe both people have some codependency characteristics. So those are some So in conclusion, the basic gist of what we've said here is simply this. When I have a situation with some codependency, there are two sort of angles that I can take to help with it. The first one is the cortex up here, and that's about belief systems, and that happens in community. Al-Anon is great, or in therapy, or with some good friends if you can find that, the 12-step community. A lot of my folks are 12-steppers, so that's great too. So the cortex is about belief, and the amygdala is about familiarity and resolving some unmet needs and unmet patterns from childhood, and that part usually happens more in therapy or in a committed relationship with where both folks want to grow, or both, some combination thereof. Hope that's helpful. If it is, consider pushing the thumbs up button. You can also invite your friends, family, and even those people who are just like strangers to you, but you friended them on Facebook. You can invite all those people to this group, and then they'll get this information too. Pretty nifty. So that's an idea. If you have questions about this and you'd like some more information, you can leave a post in the comments and I'll reply. Or you can reach out to me by direct message, or I'm on WhatsApp if you're into WhatsApp, and you can kind of ask if it's a question that's maybe better for a non-public setting. You can ask a question that way, and a lot of times I'll post on that too. Thanks for your time and for your engagement in this group. It is such a pleasure to have this little community where we can talk a little bit about anxiety and learn and grow together. Have a great day.